From Chennai. It's time for Formula One now. The Qatar Grand Prix is imminent and we can join Harry Benjamin.
Thank you very much. It absolutely is. Less than 15 minutes to go ahead of the 17th race of the season here in Qatar. And the championship titles have been decided. Red Bull became the Constructors' champions in Japan a few weeks ago. And in the sprint race yesterday here in Qatar, Max Verstappen became a three-time champion, joining an illustrious list alongside the likes of Jack Brabham, Jackie Stewart, Niki Lauda, Nelson Piquet and Ayrton Senna. But now it is all focus on the Grand Prix here under the lights at the Lusail International Circuit ahead of a 10-year run here at this circuit, and we're about 30-minute drive north of the city of Doha, located 10 kilometers away or so from the Lusail Stadium where Argentina beat France to win the 2022 World Cup just some 10 months ago. Guiding you through all the coverage alongside myself is racing driver Alex Brundle. Verstappen sealed the deal in yesterday's race, so now he's just out there for fun, right?
Out there for fun and to try to get the absolute perfect score, which is what we know Verstappen cares about. I have it on good authority that even after winning the championship yesterday evening, he still spent a massive amount of time with his engineers making sure he converted pole position into victory today in Qatar, or this evening local time today for us in the UK in Qatar. So he is going to be on it, no doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely will. Well, let's hear from Max Verstappen's boss, Rosanna Tennant, caught up with him.
Christian, we meet again, another race on this incredible weekend. Were there any celebrations last night for Max's third title?
Yeah, they were very modest. I mean, we got together as a team to celebrate the moment, raise the glass, and then it was obviously all focused on the Grand Prix today. So, it's fantastic to get that championship in the bag, but now all focus on this Grand Prix.
You guys have such a strong car, but how difficult will it be to convert a pole around this track with all of the challenges you are going to face with the tyres and the conditions this evening?
Well, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough in the pit lane for the guys as well. I mean, it's seriously hot here. They're in thick overalls. They've got probably at least 6 pit stops they're going to have to do today. And that's going to be a key factor in this Grand Prix.
And they worked hard overnight working on Checo's car. A difficult weekend for him.
The whole car. I mean, both crews jumping in, Max's guys getting involved, everybody getting involved.
All hands to the pump. We'll have a great evening tonight.
Thank you very much.
Red Bull team principal Christian Horner speaking to Rosanna Tennant, who is live down on the grid. Music's blaring, Rosanna.
It certainly is. There's a real party atmosphere down here on the grid, Harry, and it's incredibly hot as well. We've had very gusty conditions over the course of the weekend, but the wind has really dropped today. It's still 32 degrees, and underfoot it's 37 degrees. That's how hot the track is, but we've seen temperatures up around 60 degrees this weekend when it comes to track temperature. Racing under the lights, and I have to say, as I look to my left, the grandstand on the start-finish straight is absolutely packed. So many flags. I can see some Spanish flags. They may be okay to continue supporting Fernando Alonso this evening, but it's going to be difficult for them to support Carlos Sainz. He's not taking part in the Grand Prix, Harry. He had a fuel system issue.
Yeah, he will not be on the grid, will Carlos Sainz. We'll take you through the full grid rundown, but it will be a DNS, a do not start for Carlos Sainz, sadly, so that leaves us a man down. But before we come on to the runners and riders, some big news to bring you. If you haven't been with us all weekend long, there has been a tyre safety issue, which has been closely monitored throughout the weekend, and now a ruling this afternoon made by the FIA, who have imposed a maximum tyre life of 18 laps across the compounds for today's Grand Prix, and that includes tyres already used across the weekend. So at the very least, Alex, it will be a minimum 3-stop race, but these are very unique circumstances.
Some teams and drivers even talking about 4 stops as a result of the tyres they've used already throughout this sprint race weekend, and it's a really tough call for teams and drivers. They already start making their tyre plan from free practice at the beginning of the weekend. This call, of course, only coming before this evening's Grand Prix. So a massive curveball for them to get their head around, and it's going to be the most stops, certainly, that we've seen by the full field in any Grand Prix this year.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the biggest tyre issues we've seen for quite a while in Formula 1. You think back to 2020 with tyre blowouts at the British Grand Prix, 2013 as well, the same issues. And you go back to the 2005 Indianapolis Grand Prix, where only 6 cars started the race due to all the other Michelin runners pulling out of that Grand Prix for fear over tyre safety issues. It's not the first time, but that is the ruling we have been given, and we will try and keep you up to date as best we can across the Grand Prix, which will be 57 laps. But Rosanna mentioned that Carlos Sainz, with a fuel issue, will not be taking part in the Grand Prix. Let's hear from Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur.
Fred, it's going to be a difficult evening for you with just one car on the grid now. What's the problem with Carlos Sainz's car?
We had an issue on the fuel system when we fueled the car 1 hour before the race. It's a shame because we didn't have time to fix it, but it is like it is a shame for Carlos and for the team. He was in a good momentum after Monza and Singapore. But okay, let's be back in Austin stronger.
And of course, this has huge implications for the standings, the Constructors' Championship. So big choice to pull him out of today's Grand Prix.
So it's always better to have 2 cars than one, but let's fight with one, and we will see tonight where we are.
And are you as confused as we are about these tyre life limitations?
Yeah, but I think at the end it was the good decision, that it makes no sense to take some risk. And the decision involved Pirelli, the FIA, the teams, and it was a good one.
Have a good race.
Yeah, Rosanna Tennant speaking to Fred Vasseur. There's a real shame not to see Carlos Sainz taking the start of this Qatar Grand Prix. Just one car left in it then with Charles Leclerc, and Rosanna mentioning there that is tricky for the constructors as well. Red Bull may have sealed the deal in the team's championship, but Mercedes currently in second, just 26 points ahead of Ferrari. So that battle for second really is crucial and going down in these last 6 Grand Prix that we have remaining, including this one. But Rosanna, back down on the ground. The grandstands look like they're really starting to fill up now.
Absolutely, and the music is pumping, and as I'm standing in the pit lane watching the mechanics bring all the kit and equipment off the grid, so many tyres being wheeled about. And I actually had a quick chat with one of the performance engineers just before I went to the grid, and he said, you know what, Pirelli and the FIA have actually made our jobs easier. A lot less strategy discussion. They've pretty much prescribed it for us. So it's going to be an interesting race. How many pit stops? How busy will the pit lane be? If we see a safety car towards the end of the race, is everyone going to pile in? Are people going to have enough tyres? So many question marks as we head into this Grand Prix.
So many question marks as well. One question mark that is absolutely done, as we've mentioned, Max Verstappen, a 3-time world champion. He will have the best view in the house, though, starting from pole and aiming for his 49th win. But what a season it has been for Max Verstappen. Can anyone match him? Red Bull and Max Verstappen continue to break the records and make new records. Max Verstappen wins the Italian Grand Prix and makes it 10 consecutive F1 race wins.
Max, that is mighty. 10 races in a row, you're on your own, mate, now. That's history. Unbelievable, unbelievable. Well done.
Max Verstappen crosses the line, 26 points in the bag. He gets back onto the top step of the podium, and Red Bull clinch the 2nd consecutive Constructors title and take their 6th team's title.
I mean, he is absolutely relentless. He's come here with a point to prove. Didn't really need to. There's no point that he needs to prove, but he wanted to show people, me and this Red Bull car are unbeatable.
Welcome to the 3-time world champion club. Sir Jack Brabham, Jackie Stewart, Niki Lauda, Nelson Piquet, Ayrton Senna, and now Max Verstappen.
Max, you are a 3-time world champion. That's unbelievable, mate. Absolutely unbelievable. It's been an incredible year for you.
What an incredible year. Christian Horner says it absolutely perfectly. Still with 6 Grand Prix remaining, and he's wrapped up his 3rd world title, Alex. Enough can't be said about how brilliant Max Verstappen has been. How long can this go on for?
Well, as long as he's got a dominant car and is driving as well as he is. I mean, we're looking at a next rule change, at least only in 2026 perhaps, and they have got their head entirely around this format of car. Max Verstappen's got his head entirely around this nature of Formula One, so it could easily carry on through next year and beyond.
Well, absolutely. He will have the best view in the house. He'll start on the front row alongside George Russell, but going for a 49th race win will Max Verstappen be? Let's hear from him.
Yeah, I mean, of course, yeah, just enjoying the moment. I think yesterday was already a great day, and today, of course, we're starting from pole, so yeah, anything can happen. Of course, we have the 4 stops that we have to do, so it will be quite interesting to see how that will work out for everyone. But yeah, just looking forward to today and try to, of course, also enjoy it.
Interesting, 4 stops. Some teams are thinking apparently 3 stops. So is that a giveaway on strategy?
Well, we have to do 3 stops at least, right? So yeah, that's already something that we have to deal with.
Lovely. I know all of your rivals will probably be hoping that you went out and celebrated a little bit last night, didn't get to bed until the early hours. But you were in late, I know, with the engineers figuring out exactly what happened in the sprint and how you can make good on that today. How fired up are you, despite the fact that you have nothing left to win for the season? The title is yours.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday we were a bit unlucky in the start. You know, there were the soft runners that got in between, and then there were a lot of safety cars, so we couldn't really show our true pace, I think. But hopefully today will be a little bit different. Then it's, of course, a much longer race anyway, so a lot of things that can happen there. But I think we have a quick car.
Max Verstappen speaking to Will Buxton a little earlier on, and a rather late night, but only the sparkling water to celebrate Max Verstappen's 3 times a world champion in Formula 1. But they bring up good points, Alex. It comes back to the tyre debate, and that is something that has overshadowed this whole weekend. We mentioned it earlier, but what are you expecting from the race? How are these drivers and teams going to tackle this? Because a lot of them aren't very happy about these changes.
It really depends on what tyres they've got left from how they've moved through the weekend. Actually, the strategy as it is benefits those drivers who have more of the hard and the medium specifications with less of the soft left for the Grand Prix. Those have proved the dominant tyres over the long run. Interestingly, drivers who've made it less far through the sprint qualifying sessions benefit from taking more mediums into the race, and that opens up their windows in terms of the strategy, because the soft tyre, as we saw in the sprint, only really capable of around 7 or 8 laps at proper pace, so it locks you in to those strategic boxes.
It certainly does. So the likes of Yuki Tsunoda, Alex Albon, Logan Sargent and Kevin Magnussen all further down the field, but they do have a fresh set of hard and medium compounds to play with, so they can get some fresh rubber at each spot, so that gives them even more an advantage to be flexible.
Interestingly though, a little bit of a strategic spill there from Max Verstappen. There are some drivers looking at potentially using the soft and taking 4 stops, and it also depends. We had 3 safety cars in the sprint race here yesterday evening. If there is an intervention, it could change the strategy massively here.
Yesterday's sprint race winner, a welcome to the Winners' Club in Formula 1, Oscar Piastri, is looking cool, calm and collected. The visor is still open in his McLaren cockpit. A brilliant race from Piastri yesterday. He'll start from 6th today. How much confidence does that give him going into this Grand Prix?
I'd give him a massive amount of confidence. To cross the line first, whether it's a sprint race or not, changes the game, and you lose that little bit, that last edge of nerves behind the wheel. Oscar Piastri, starting only in 6th position in his McLaren, has a lot more to do today, has got to get past what have been a very hard charging set of Mercedes throughout this weekend. A much stronger race weekend for them, the sole remaining Ferrari, and Fernando Alonso, who absolutely loves this circuit, got a podium in it in an Alpine last time we were here, so a lot to do for him, but certainly he'll be full of confidence heading into 57 laps here.
Well, the team personnel are starting to clear the grid as we get ready for the formation lap for the 17th race in this 2023 F1 season. It's time for the Qatar Grand Prix. They peel away down into turn 1 around this Losail International Circuit. It's Max Verstappen, the 3-time champ, aiming for a 49th career win, who starts on pole. Alongside him is George Russell, his 3rd front row start of the season. He's in front of Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso and Charles Leclerc round out the top 5. Oscar Piastri, our sprint race winner from yesterday, is 6th in front of Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon. Valtteri Bottas gets his 3rd top 10 start of the season from 9th, and rounding out the top 10 is Lando Norris. Yuki Tsunoda goes from 11th. There'll be a gap where Carlos Sainz should be on the grid from 12th. He will not be starting this Grand Prix. 13th place is Alexander Albon in front of Nico Hulkenberg. Logan Sargent rounds out the top 15. Lance Stroll is 16th in front of Liam Lawson. Kevin Magnussen is 18th, and 19th and last on the grid will be Zhou Guanyu. Starting from the pit lane is the other Red Bull in Sergio Perez. Getting towards the end of this formation lap then, and Sergio Perez will be starting from the pit lane. That is because they've had to rebuild that entire chassis. They've taken a new power unit as well on there, so they've changed the elements. That's why he's starting from the pit lane. What do you think Alex Sergio can do from plumb last?
Well, he's going to start on the hard compound tyre, so that is a very different strategy. But unlike other races, he's not going to be able to run beyond those magic 18 laps on it, so he can't go long through the race.
Sit down for all this, guys.
That is the voice of Lewis Hamilton, who is saying that because he's the only driver in the top 8 who will start on the hard compound tyre. Verstappen, Russell, Alonso, Leclerc, Piastri, Gasly and Ocon will all start on the medium. The soft looking much slower in the sprint yesterday.
They're getting towards the end of the formation lap in front of a sold-out weekend. 120,000 people in the grandstands. Rosanna Tennant is down there in the pit lane.
I certainly am, and it is incredibly hot. The fans are on their feet. They are excited to see Formula One cars race around this track. Of course, it's been resurfaced. Another challenge for the drivers. We've got those curbs. We've got a change in conditions. Yes, it's still hot, but the wind has dropped. So all those braking reference points perhaps have changed a little as well. So much going into this evening's Grand Prix.
Absolutely, and a sole Ferrari on the grid while the other is stuck in the garage. Carlos Sainz with a fuel leak will not be starting this Grand Prix. Before we get underway for the Qatar Grand Prix, elsewhere on 5 Live there's Premier League action in the form of Arsenal versus Man City. At home, Arsenal at the Emirates. Steve Crossman, John Murray and Peter Schmeichel with all the action on that. That's over on 5 Live, but right here on 5 Sports Extra on the BBC website and app and across BBC Sounds, we are about to get going for the Qatar Grand Prix with myself, Harry Benjamin, the racing driver Alex Brundle is alongside me, and down at the pit lane is Rosanna Tennant. The titles have all been decided. Max Verstappen, a 3-time champion. Red Bull, the Constructors' Championship. Alex, quickly before we start, as Zhou Guanyu lines up in his final grid spot, first thoughts going into turn 1.
First corner first is going to be the charm for Max Verstappen, who should have the pace if he's able to do so.
Green flag at the back. 57 laps around this Lusail International Circuit. Verstappen on pole, Russell alongside. It's ice to the lights and foot to the floor as we go racing for the Qatar Grand Prix. And there's a good start for Verstappen, who cuts across straight away to the inside to fend off Russell, who comes oh so close to his teammate Hamilton. It's 3-1. The two Mercedes collide. Hamilton's off, Russell's off. It's elements of Spain all over again. 2016, when the two Mercedes took each other out, but instead of Rosberg and Hamilton, it's Russell and Hamilton. They carry on. The Mercedes are off in the background. Verstappen leads from Piastri in second.
Russell has managed to continue, but Lewis Hamilton beached in the gravel with serious damage to his car. There's still contact for one of the Aston Martins at the back, and it looks like there's a puncture for one of the Williams as they head down towards turn 6.
Further back in that turn 6, once again 3-1 doesn't quite go. It's involving the two Williams drivers and an Aston Martin. That's further back in the pack. Hamilton and Russell reporting they've both got damage. Hamilton is out of this race. A wheel flying off of that Mercedes car, stuck in the gravel. The 7-time champion is out of this one. The yellow flag is out. Verstappen leads Piastri. Alonso's up into the top 3. Then comes Leclerc and Ocon, the top 5.
And what about that start from Oscar Piastri, through from 6th on the grid to 2nd in the race? We've got a safety car deployed for the stricken car of Lewis Hamilton.
Not even halfway through lap 1, and once again we have a safety car here in Qatar. In yesterday's sprint race we had 3 safety cars in a shorter race. That was only 19 laps, and 1 lap into 57 of them for the Grand Prix. We have our first safety car appearance as Lewis Hamilton clambers out of his Mercedes cockpit. He looks dejected. He takes his gloves off. The Mercedes fans in the grandstands are biting their nails. They are so upset. The two drivers coming together, and it looked like at first glance just a lap one racing incident.
Lewis Hamilton sitting in the gravel there in his Mercedes looks like he's on the surface of the moon. So far he is into the sand on the outside of turn 1 here in Qatar. But remember, he has that red sidewall soft tyre on, which fires up much more quickly at the race circuit here at Qatar, but also is going to be done much more quickly as well. He needed to make that move around the outside of his teammate, and it just didn't come off. George Russell in the pits for new tyres and to fix a front wing perhaps on his car.
Yeah, the mechanics get to work. They managed to change 3 of the wheels quite quickly, and he's changing on to a set of the yellow or medium compound tyres, but the front left is very slow on, and it's a very slow getaway for George Russell as he now trundles down the pit lane and rejoins this race under safety car conditions then, and it all happened in the rundown to turn 1.
Verstappen in the second phase of the start had to cut across to the inside to cover off George Russell. Hamilton got a better start, as well he might, on the soft compound tyre, and then the left front of George Russell's car just catches the rear right of Lewis Hamilton.
Come on! What the hell? Guys, come on! 2 races in a row.
Then the unbroadcastable in part radio of George Russell as they head down towards turn 1, but it's a long arcing turn 1 here in Qatar. Lewis Hamilton tried to arc around the outside of it, the right rear hooking over the left front of George Russell's Mercedes.
It was a full 360 for Russell to get back into this race, but for the sounds of Lewis Hamilton, which is what you can hear going up through the gears into turn 1, into the braking zone, turns into the right-hander, gets the clout on the right rear, and into the gravel he goes.
Looks like you're okay, mate. Yeah, I'm taken out by my own teammate.
Those two have had frosty inter-team radios before, but always in person they are a picture-perfect couple. But I think there'll be a big debrief come the end of this Grand Prix. It was a decent start for Max Verstappen. We just had another look at it, another angle front on. Alex, what did you make of it from that perspective?
I think it is a racing incident. Hamilton trying to sweep round the outside of his teammate, and what he's not clocked is that Max Verstappen is still to the inside of George Russell. George can't go any further right. Hamilton doesn't want to go any further left because he's out in the grey.
Not even one lap completed and a safety car is out because the two Mercedes have come to blows into turn 1. They've crashed together, Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. Russell still in this race, Hamilton out of it, still under safety car conditions. Verstappen leads. Okay, this is the sound of Oscar Piastri, who had a rocketed start in his McLaren. Yesterday's sprint winner started 6th. He had a picture-perfect view of the two Mercedes taking each other out. And right place, right time for Piastri to get up into 2nd.
And I think wrong place, wrong time for Fernando Alonso, who'd made a lovely start, tried to jink to the left of George Russell's spinning Mercedes, then had to go right, allowing Oscar Piastri to sneak up the inside and make a beautiful start, as you say, Harry, to take that McLaren up to 2nd position. So it's the same leading to as we had yesterday in the sprint race. They're just somewhat reversed.
Lewis Hamilton walking dejectedly back to the pit lane. And there will be big talks in the Mercedes camp come the end of this Grand Prix. Still under safety car conditions here in Qatar. It's lap 3 of 57. Verstappen leads Piastri. Then it's Alonso, the top 3.
So sorry, guys. I wasn't even looking behind. I was just focused ahead and just came from nowhere.
Russell then apologising on the radio, and you can hear the frustration in his voice.
There wasn't a front wing change that I saw for that Mercedes, but Russell said he had damage as he came into the pit lane, so I do wonder if they just had a look, realised they couldn't do anything to the front of the floor there and sent it. It'll be interesting to see if he has the pace that he was expecting to have moving through the Grand Prix as Lewis Hamilton dejectedly continues to make his way back to the pit lane. Safety car deployed. We've obviously got this maximum number of laps that they can undertake on each set of tyre. Our understanding in the BBC Combox is that this does not change that. They still will only be allowed to undertake 18 laps on each set of these tyres even if some of them are under safety car.
Pirelli had said before this, there is no allowance that has been made for laps completed under a safety car, along with laps to the grid and the formation laps, not counting towards that. They do not count towards that 18, but there is no allowance for safety car laps. And we are then getting the first of our pit stops. We are still under safety car conditions, so an Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas comes in along with the Haas of Kevin Magnussen, and we have Lance Stroll and the Aston Martin all pitting. Oh, and that was tight between Magnussen and Stroll. Magnussen peeling out into the fast lane of this pit lane and just about getting in front of Stroll. There was nearly contact. I wonder if Haas will be investigated for an unsafe release, but as they peel out and rejoin this race, just in from race control, the safety car will be coming to an end at the end of this lap.
It looked like Stroll didn't have to check up on the brakes at all, so normally you wouldn't get an unsafe release for that. We'll see if there's anything from race control.
Lost for words, honestly. Just seeing the replays on my TV screen. Couldn't do anything. Totally sandwiched.
Keep your head down. Keep it in this race.
Yeah, I know. It's...
Wise.
Lap one.
That's the right response.
Let's race now. Let's do the best out of it.
Wise words from his engineer, and that sounded like Toto Wolff as well, who isn't actually here this weekend, but he is dialed in with the team. The Aston Martin safety car, driven by Bert Mailander, races away towards the end and come in or into the pit lane. Max Verstappen begins to back up the entire grid, and we will get back for some green flag racing with 5.4 kilometres, 3.3 miles of this Losail International Circuit. Under the lights, 16 turns, 6 to the left and 10 to the right. Verstappen has the edge on everybody else. He's got the prime view in the house, but he is going oh so slowly, keeping Piastri, Alonso, Leclerc, Ocon the top 5 behind, Norris, Gasly, Tsunoda, Hülkenberg, Albon the top 10, and Verstappen has gone in the final sector of the lap, coming through turns 12, 13 and 14. The fast right-handers, Verstappen's put his foot to the floor and already has a massive margin on Piastri.
It absolutely left Piastri for dead. We also saw Nico Hülkenberg under investigation for incorrect starting positions. That may well be the Haas outside of its grid box, but Verstappen not under pressure at all as he screams down the 1 kilometre front straight here in Qatar. There is a move in the background and it's up the inside of the Alpine of Pierre Gasly. Goes Yuki Tsunoda trying to make the move, manages to wriggle through then up the inside, but it's a big swap of oversteer for Yuki Tsunoda. Haas actually making a move then in the background. Nico Hülkenberg putting a move on Albon.
Little bit of contact almost between the AlphaTauri and the Haas. They just about get away for it. That's the battle for 8th and 9th, but further back we've got a Mercedes and a Red Bull. It's Perez and Russell being forced out onto the runoff area, kicking up the dust. Perez, who started from the pit lane, up into 13th, and Russell, who is involved in that turn 1 incident, having come into the pits, is now in 14th and is desperate to get past the Mexican, who himself crashed out in quite dramatic fashion in yesterday's sprint race as well. But they're not in the points at the moment. Points reserved for the top 10, but they are fighting tooth and nail for every scrap of track they can get. Verstappen leads Piastri 1.3 seconds the gap.
Great stuff from Perez, only driver in the field starting on that hard compound tyre, up from 13th, having started in the pit lane. It was those who started on the soft we saw into the pits under the safety car, so they're relinquishing that tyre after a very low number of laps, wanting to get through it, wanting to get off it, and that can actually be a masterstroke strategically when you look at the Tetris blocks of the way their strategy will play out through the rest of the race. That phase for them is done and they can get on with their more preferred compounds.
Starting lap 6 of 57, let's check in with Rosanna Tennant down in the pit lane.
Yeah, and it was a busy pit lane as Valtteri Bottas, Kevin Magnussen, Lance Stroll and Liam Lawson came in to change tyres. A little bit of a close call, as you called, Harry, between the Haas and the Aston Martin. Not sure if that'll be investigated, but what an amazing start to this Grand Prix for Oscar Piastri, of course our latest winner in Formula 1. He won the sprint yesterday, the Australian rookie in the McLaren, chasing down Max Verstappen, and he's just hovering around that second mark, isn't he? But I fear that he may get swallowed up by Fernando Alonso as well, who's within DRS range when that kicks in.
And while you've been chatting, Rosanna, there have been some proper moves going out on the track. First of all, between 8th and 9th, Hülkenberg fending off Tsunoda for all his might, and once again Perez and Russell going tooth and and nail, and Russell now has the better of Perez. Russell up to 13th and recovering after his front row start, and this is the sound of how he did it, coming through the left-hander, coming into the middle sector. He closes right up to the back of Perez, who goes to the inside to defend, Alex.
Round the outside of turn 4 and manages to make it all the way around the outside of turn 5. That Mercedes looking absolutely fine. We in the BBC Combox are getting a look back at Nico Hülkenberg, who's parked outside of his grid box with his right-hand wheel to the right-hand side. And what he's actually done is parked up in sight, so of course did not take the start of the Grand Prix position, and he's parked too far forward, Nico Hülkenberg, so that will be a slam dunk penalty for the Haas driver.
Absolutely. So lap 7 of 57, Verstappen leads Piastri, Alonso, Leclerc, Ocon the top 5, Norris, Gasly, Hülkenberg, Tsunoda, Albon the top 10, and our point scorers: Sargent, Joe, Russell, Perez, Bottas the top 15, Magnussen, Stroll and Lawson the 18th and last of our drivers still in this race, with no Lewis Hamilton crashing out with his teammate in turn 1, and Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, who never even got the chance to start this race after a fuel leak. This is the sound of George Russell, who is trying to make amends for his turn 1 clash with teammate Hamilton. He's currently in 13th, and now he's looking at the rear of the Alfa Romeo of Zhou Guanyu, who started down in 19th and has had quite a good run of it up into 12th. He's made use of some who have come in for pit stops already, those being Russell, Bottas, Magnussen, Stroll and Lawson, who are all at the rear of the field.
Still on a recovery drive, George Russell, and we've seen this so many times from him before. Really feels like he's let the team down and then sets about making good of it. We can listen in to Fernando Alonso, who's in 3rd position in the Grand Prix right now, losing a little bit of time to Oscar Piastri, and he's going to lose more. Oversteer, armfuls of oversteer through the mid-corner of turn 4, put Fernando Alonso off and through the dust with that cascading off the back of the Aston Martin as he rejoins.
Alonso looking to get back onto the podium for the first time since the Dutch Grand Prix 3, now 4 Grand Prix ago. So in that tight fight in the constructors as well, Aston Martin currently placed in 4th, starting to look over their shoulder slightly at McLaren, who are coming for them, having shown mighty performance improvements thanks to upgrades over the last few races. But the mid-pack is where some of the scraps are happening right now. Hülkenberg and Tsunoda were going hammer and tongs for it, but now Tsunoda has fallen into the clutches of Albon, who had a little look down into turn 1, couldn't make the move there as sparks flew. The Albon driver, the Williams driver, had to peel back in behind Tsunoda, who is holding on to that 9th spot for dear life. Meanwhile, the second Aston Martin of Lance Stroll, who has had a torrid weekend so far, defending from Kevin Magnussen in the hat, who equally hasn't felt comfortable with this Losail International circuit, but tucks in behind as the Danish driver behind the Canadian Aston Martin racer.
Been an incredibly tough weekend for Lance Stroll, just has not had the pace, had plenty of frustration throughout the full weekend here, and just seems not to have the pace again. Alonso up in the top 3, Stroll still struggling, sitting in 16th in the other Aston Martin. George Russell is continuing to make his way through the field. His latest victim was Zhou Guanyu, who he made a place on down the inside of turn 6. Very textbook stuff.
He loves
from George
that turn
Russell.
6 though, doesn't he? He made an absolutely fantastic send there on Oscar Piastri in yesterday's race, did Russell, but at that occasion it was for the lead of the sprint, and on the occasion just gone with Joe, it was only for 12th spot, but he's now 6.5 tenths behind Logan Sargent in the Williams, who is just in 11th. DRS is now activated down the main straight. The drag reduction system, the rear wing flap opens at the back of the car. You get an extra kilometres an hour down the straight and through. On the inside of Sargent goes Russell. Nice, easy, clean move for the British driver, who next stop will be Albon's 10th place. But Albon is still in an absolutely fantastic fight with Yuki Tsunoda as they come through turns 3 and 4. Tsunoda planting that AlphaTauri in all the right places for the time being.
Albon, one of those drivers who have a fantastic amount of tyres to bring into this race, given that they didn't make it that far through sprint qualifying. Has a couple of new hards and a couple of new mediums to take him through the race with a lot of strategic options here. Finds himself in a low drag Williams inside the top 10, and this one playing out very, very well for Alexander Albon, as he appears to have more pace throughout the race uncharacteristically in the Williams than he did in qualifying.
This is the sound of the Thai driver, who has never raced around this circuit before the weekend and had a fantastic recovery drive up through the field in yesterday's sprint. Kind of went a little bit unnoticed because all the plaudits were going to Verstappen and Oscar Piastri. But once again, Albon doing a fantastic job in that Williams to score and maximise every single bit of track action he can get. He's currently on for 1 point in 10th, but we're only on lap 10 of 57 here. Tsunoda under pressure, then comes Albon, then it's Russell, then Sargent. So Russell has made the move on Sargent. He did that through DRS as Tsunoda comes into the pits.
Tsunoda into the pit lane, and that for Tsunoda will be off that medium tyre very early indeed. So I do wonder if that was a scheduled one for Yuki Tsunoda. We're seeing Sergio Perez continue to make his way through the traffic. He was making a move there, or trying to make a move. He's still defending from Zhou. He's still trying to get by Zhou.
Yeah, he almost had a go down the main straight with DRS, but Zhou did a fantastic job of defending and cutting back through turn 1, forced Perez offline. But Perez, clearly in a faster car in that Red Bull, closes up under braking, and Sargent, who was just ahead of both of them, just had a big lock-up. I think was that coming into turn number 6, it might have been, through then the right-hander. Sargent locking up and looking a little bit worrisome in that Williams, a little bit on shaky ground. He crashed out in the sprint yesterday all on his own. A man that is under pressure for the one and only remaining Grand Prix seat in Formula 1 for 2024 needs a good showing. He's just in front of Zhou and Perez, and they're bringing Valtteri Bottas along for the ride as well.
Perez making a bit of a meal of getting by Zhou at this stage with what should be a much faster car. He is on that hard tyre, which has missed a bit of pace in the medium. The medium clearly the preferred tyre, and that is the tyre that Zhou is on. They're about 9 laps old now and making their way nicely through the Grand Prix. Most drivers looking after them relatively well. Back out front, it is Verstappen who's made a decent gap as Esteban Ocon makes his way into the pit lane in the Alpine.
So if the data I have in front of me is correct, Ocon in total has done 10 laps on the tyre he's just gotten rid of. We'll see what he comes out with. Tsunoda, who pitted a few laps ago as well, he came out on a brand spanking new set of medium compound tyres. He was one of the drivers that had the ability to do that. So we'll keep an eye on Tsunoda, who is now at the back of this field, who might have a little bit of an advantage as this race continues to play out. But the front runners have not pitted yet. The highest placed runner was Esteban Ocon, who came in from 7th. He's now down to 17th.
I don't think it'll be an advantage because now he's got to try to manage tyres through the full distance. This race cuts up into 14 lap sequences between the pit stops if you cut it evenly. And even if you are a driver like Tsunoda who can afford to do the full complement of laps on every single set of tyres, you wouldn't want to be pitting early and moving that burden later on through the race. You want to do as much lap time as possible on the newest possible tyres.
Over on 5 Live at Emirates, Arsenal versus Manchester City in the 93rd minute, going into extra time. Coming towards the end of it, it's 1-0 Arsenal. Full coverage of that is still available over on BBC Radio 5 Live. Steve Crossman, John Murray and Peter Schmeichel talking you through all the action. Here though on 5 Sports Extra, online, on the app and on BBC Sounds. We are here for the Qatar Grand Prix with myself, Harry Benjamin, racing driver Alex Brundle is alongside me, and down in the pits is Rosanna Tennant, and pit stops are starting to play out here in a race that has a rather unique feel to it. Alonso comes into the pits in the Aston Martin from 3rd. So does Gasly. We have a unique tyre situation here. The FIA have mandated that nobody can go beyond 18 laps on a single set of tyres. Then they have to come in before that. Otherwise, they're off to the stewards, and that's for tyre safety reasons.
You've got to remember as well that some of the tyres they started this race on will not have been brand new. So they will have carried laps over from previously in the weekend. That means that they are not allowed to go further than 18 laps on total tyre life, including the previous laps they've done. So these drivers boxing before 18 laps may have met their quota from the tyre manufacturer, even though they appear to be stopping early.
So Alonso came in from 3rd. He's now out there on a fresh medium, and he's come out in 15th. Gasly has come out in 17th position, so they're currently at the back. That has promoted everybody who has yet to pit or pitted earlier at the start of this race, much like George Russell, who had an incident with his teammate Lewis Hamilton in turn 1. That put Hamilton out straight away. Russell into the pits for a change of tyres, and he's just made a lovely move on Alex Albon to get 6th place down the inside for the Thai driver. So he's now down the inside of the Thai driver. So Albon in 7th, Russell up to 6th as Piastri from 2nd comes in his McLaren.
Slightly slow on the right rear for Oscar Piastri. Didn't lose too much with it, but it's a 3.1 second stop time as opposed to a 2.6 second for Charles Leclerc, who stopped with him in the sole remaining Ferrari.
Out of the pit stops then, Leclerc comes out, and so does Piastri. He feeds out just behind the Haas and the Alpha Tauri, and it's Lawson versus Magnussen, currently in 11th and 12th as it currently stands, as the second McLaren now is told to box. That means to come into the pits at the end of this lap. Meanwhile, out in front, Verstappen has an almost 10-second lead. He can almost do what he wants, right, Alex?
He really can, but the problem he's got is they can't pick a gap for him because of the limitation on pit stops. So normally Red Bull would run Verstappen until there was a nice gap to slot him back into in the field. But as a result of the limitation of the number of laps he can take on, they are going to have to put him back into traffic. Max Verstappen will have to pass cars and pass them well and expeditiously if he wants to win this Grand Prix.
Verstappen then does indeed hold the lead from Norris, who is about to come into the pits. Then Russell, who has recovered to third after an early pit stop at the end of lap 1. Hülkenberg in the Haas is up to fourth, but he does have a penalty for starting in the wrong grid spot. Albon is fifth, Sargent, Joe, Perez, Bottas, Stroll, the top 10 still to shake out after this first run of pit stops. This is the sound of Lando Norris, who slows down to 80 kilometers an hour and peels in to his McLaren pit box. He stops on his markers, and just within 2.5 seconds the green light comes on. All 4 tyres have been changed, and he's sent back on his way.
And we've got a view along down the 1 kilometre front straight. It's a very long pit lane here. We can see Oscar Piastri blast through. Charles Leclerc, will he blast through as well? Yes, he will. Lando Norris will peel back onto the circuit in the Papaya McLaren behind Leclerc.
Yeah, Leclerc then getting the edge on Norris at the end of that one. That's at the moment 12th and 13th for Leclerc and Norris. Norris, who was so hard on himself after yesterday's sprint race, his teammate getting the victory in that, and Norris really not happy with his performance despite ending up in third. While we were watching the pit stops, Russell made a lovely move round the outside of the Haas, one of the Haas's. I think it might have been Hülkenberg as he was coming through the field, and this is the sound of Fernando Alonso battling with the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, getting down the inside, muscling his way through.
George Russell round the outside in turn 1 there, much in a similar way to the way Lewis Hamilton was trying to go round the outside of him on the first corner.
On that occasion, not quite working out. Lap 15 of 57 then. So who are we still waiting for pit stops then? Max Verstappen is waiting to come into the pits, as is Albon, Joe and Perez, who started on the hard compounded tyre. He started from the pit lane because of a power unit change and pretty much a full chassis change. I'll tell you who's come in though, Alex. George Russell, and even with his visor up.
George Russell back into the pit lane. Interesting to see his visor up there. I wonder if he couldn't find the switch that he wanted under the lights on his way into the pit lane, but all seemed to go well for the pit stop for George Russell. Found himself in second position in the Grand Prix, albeit 16 seconds back from leader Max Verstappen before he pitted. It's now Alex Albon in the Williams who's been promoted through to that position.
Okay, Verstappen still has that lead. Albon up into second, Perez, as you say, up into third. Norris, here he is.
It's clear the pace is strong, so let's really try and make sure we use that just for next time.
Okay, so that's Norris on the radio. What do you think he means by that, Alex?
He's trying to talk strategically to the team and saying, get me in some clear air and help me out. The response surely, though, from McLaren will be, Lando, we can't pit you anywhere else, but what will get you through to the Grand Prix? Oscar Piastri making the move down the inside of Kevin Magnussen in the Haas in the meantime.
Yeah, nice easy DRS pass, and I think the same is coming for Sergio Perez, who is fighting with Valtteri Bottas down the inside for Perez, or Zhou Guanyu, my apologies, the other Alfa Romeo driver, who is currently now in fourth. Perez up into third, that's how he did it. Bottas is in fifth, having had a top 10 starting position as well. So Russell Pitts is back out there. He's fed out in 15th spot behind Gasly in front of Tsunoda.
So pit stop loss here from 26 to 28 seconds. It's one of the longer pit lanes of the year. Max Verstappen now sits 22 seconds clear of Alex Albon in second place. So he dropped back into the leading pack after a pit stop, which is coming in 2 laps time. McLaren then to the inside.
Lap 16 of 57, and we are down to 18 cars in this race. Carlos Sainz didn't start the race due to a fuel leak in his Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton did start this race from third on the grid, but an incident with his teammate into turn 1 sent him flying into the gravel and out of this race. He's talking to Rosanna Tennant.
Lewis, such a disappointing way to finish your weekend here in Qatar. Were you aware that Max was on the inside there of George and it was just a racing incident?
I mean, I could see those guys, and it's fine. It's a fine line. Yeah, just ultimately, sorry to all the team at the factory. And
you were obviously on that faster starting tyre, the Red Bull tyre. That was your choice, I imagine, to get a good launch off the start.
No, I had no other tyres.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Lewis Hamilton sounding dejected. Let's hear from Verstappen first.
Okay, Max, this is your last lap. We have boxed this lap. Box this lap.
So Max Verstappen then getting mighty close to his 18-lap limit, but before he hits it, they're going to call him into the pits with a 23-second advantage over the second-place man, currently Alex Albon. This is the sound, though, of Charles Leclerc, who was just dying on the move on Kevin Magnussen. This is to get up into 9th, but Leclerc breezes past on DRS.
Yeah, it was Norris past Lawson, who's now made his way past Magnussen as well. We caught a few moments ago, but Max Verstappen out front. 26 to 28 seconds. He will drop back behind Alexander Albon, who will then have to pit in short order himself, as will Sergio Perez, who's run from the start of the Grand Prix. This clearly the plan then for Verstappen, to try to get as far clear as he possibly can, using his best tyres in these early stages to stop everyone else bothering me, as we're seeing a fantastic move from Oscar Piastri around the outside of turn 1.
Yeah, lovely move for Piastri up into 6th in front of Stroll in the Aston Martin. That is the sound of the tyre guns getting ready down at Red Bull, and this is the sound of Max Verstappen slowing down to 80 kilometres an hour. He hits the pit limiter. He doesn't have far to travel before he slots into the number 1 garage, or just outside of it in his pit box, hits all the markers, and in the blink of an eye, all 4 tyres are changed in 2.4 seconds to be precise, and I think they might be getting ready for Sergio Perez as well. But Verstappen is now trundling down the pit lane and will rejoin this race. Will he do it just in front of Albon, who is screaming down the main straight at the moment? Albon will be carrying much more speed going into turn 1. Albon, who has yet to pit, breezes into turn 1 and takes the lead of this race. Verstappen, though, feeds out in 2nd, and Red Bull were waiting for Sergio Perez, who gets rid of his hard compound of tyres and feeds back out into this race. We'll wait and see where he feeds exactly into. Norris continuing to do battles, his teammate as well. Piastri flying up through the field. Fantastic move through turn 1 and into turn 2. Gets up into 4th in front of Bottas.
McLaren super fast at this stage of the Grand Prix. Piastri was a second quicker than Bottas and Zhou Guanyu last time around. Only the 2 Red Bulls were quicker than the McLaren at this stage of the race. Oscar Piastri with another beautiful move, this time to the inside of turn 1, fades left, then right in the McLaren, has the car absolutely under control as he arcs the steering wheel right and takes the apex of T1.
Yeah, Piastri really coming into his own more and more with every Grand Prix that goes by. The Australian rookie having an absolutely marvellous season, having started, both McLaren starting rather miserably. The rates of development that the Woking squad have brought is fantastic.
Lance, you need to let Fernando by as soon as you can, please. Important, he's on a different strategy.
So that was Stroll being told to get out of the way. Your teammate's coming through. He's faster on a different strategy, and that is currently over 6th and 7th as it stands right now. Still waiting for Albon to come into the pits. He does do so as I speak. Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas, along with Stroll, all need to come into the pits as well.
Stroll on a 14-lap old set of medium tyres. Fernando Alonso on a 6-lap old set. So very much at different phases of their stint. This pit stop for Alexander Albon seemed to go okay, slightly tardy. We've got a battle between a McLaren and the Ferrari.
Into turn 1, Norris fighting with Charles Leclerc. Leclerc giving it all he's got. Norris ahead for the time being of Leclerc, and Norris trying to prove a point against his teammate Piastri, who's currently up in 2nd though. Norris fighting through, and the papaya orange McLaren darting left, darting right down the main straight to keep Leclerc on his toes, and Norris currently winning that battle out. Norris in 6th, Leclerc in in 7th, and it was all set up by Norris coming down the main straight. He crossed the DRS line, opened the rear wing flap, and Leclerc tried to get his elbows out, but Norris was coming for him, and while that was coming, the two Aston Martins changed places, but sparks were flying between the British racer and the Monegasque.
We've got a headwind down that front straight today, so it's making this DRS effect super powerful. Lando Norris appearing to have so much overspeed, and they can go either side, can't they? Down to turn 1, Lando Norris making the move. A move as well for George Russell in the Mercedes, down the inside of his favourite spot in turn 6.
It's becoming Russell corner, that, isn't it? The almost half a hairpin left-hander for Russell to get himself up into 10th on Kevin Magnussen. Lap 20 of 57, Verstappen leads Piastri by 7.5 seconds. Then comes the battle for 3rd, which isn't quite a battle on paper, as Alonso breezes past Valtteri Bottas, and Alonso retakes that 3rd spot. Bottas clinging on for dear life in that Alfa Romeo. He did start up in 9th. He's currently in 4th. He'll have to come in soon to get rid of his, I believe they're 16-lap-old medium tyres. So the limit is 18, and he'll have to come in before then. Otherwise, he'll be sent to the stewards and probably black flagged as well. Bottas in 4th, Stroll in 5th. He'll have to do the same. Norris and Leclerc battling for 6th and 7th. Ocon, Gasly, Russell up into the top 10 now.
Perez playing a game of snakes and ladders, started on the hard, ran it for the full distance. Now he's jumped across to the medium and has just made a move on Alexander Albon, who erstwhile led the Grand Prix. That's the nature of the slot machine race that we're seeing. Lap 20 of 57 so far. Sergio Perez still with that work to do after starting his Red Bull from the pit lane. The next car up the road for him will be, well, the next cars will be the 2 AlphaTauris of Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda.
That's the voice of the racing driver Alex Brundle, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. Down in the pits is Rosanna Tennant, and this is coverage of the Qatar Grand Prix, where Max Verstappen, who sealed the deal, his 3-time World Championship in yesterday's sprint, out there now purely for pride with a 7.4 second lead over the rookie hotshot for McLaren, Piastri in 2nd. Then comes Alonso up into 3rd, Bottas 4th, Stroll 5th. That is the top 5, still waiting for Bottas and Stroll. Bottas certainly to come into the pits, and Stroll as well. Meanwhile, the fights are still happening though. Norris getting up into that 5th spot, round the outside of Stroll, I should say, who does keep that Aston Martin in there as Norris arcs round the outside, but in the end the writing is on the wall for Lance Stroll, who concedes that position. Norris 5th, Stroll is 6th.
Russell negotiating with the rear of the Alpine of Pierre Gasly, having a look around the outside of turn 3, has to follow him in though to turns 4 and 5, and the front of that Mercedes will wash out. Does he have the braking? Not this time, down towards turn 6, although he's shaped to the inside for a little bit of a look at Pierre Gasly. Both the Mercedes and the McLaren super quick. Just listening in for another look at that move, potential move around the outside for George Russell, who was shown the curb by Pierre Gasly on the outside of turn 1.
Yeah, Gasly not giving an inch. Russell will be on the radio, and here he is. He pushed me straight off, is what Russell reports over the radio, and it's hard to argue otherwise. I'm sure the stewards will have a little note of that at some stage. Hasn't come up on our timing screens just yet. Tell you what is coming up on our timing screens though. Track limits being deleted everywhere, particularly at turn 5. This track becoming a real problem for these track limits, really, and you only get so many of those before you get a penalty.
There are only 3 cars in the sprint race which didn't suffer a track limits violation at all. I was expecting to see penalties by now, if I'm honest. You get 3 strikes and you're out, and then there's an escalation of the penalties that drivers can be given. Drivers as well in the pit lane. We've got Bottas in, Stroll in, Magnussen in, and Lawson in for mandatory pit stops.
So the ones who lasted as long as they could now coming into the pit, so we'll get a picture of what the order truly looks like. Down into turn 1, the arcing right-hander Albon trying it round the outside of Tsunoda. Tsunoda not having any of it, getting his elbows out. Albon looks like he's got the car with more speed at the moment, able to plant that Williams where he needs it, but Tsunoda has been defending from the get-go here, and having pitted early, he's now got back up into the top 10. Tsunoda 10th, Albon 11th, but the Thai driver is coming.
And the angulation of those front tyres is anything to go by. It looked like Albon just didn't quite have the front end to get all the way around the outside of a slightly pointier AlphaTauri on the apex of turn 1, but he does have the speed and he's able to follow. And one thing we do know about that Williams is it can be a rocket ship in a straight line. Let's see what he can do down the front straight next time.
Verstappen, Piastri, Alonso, Norris, Leclerc, the top 5. Here is Albon.
I don't get it. I'm slower than I was before.
So, we think he looks like he's got the speed, but clearly he doesn't feel like he's got the speed, does Albon?
Depends how fast he was before, doesn't it?
Well, he's currently battling for 10th spot with Tsunoda. Leclerc rounds out the top 5, then Ocon, Gasly, Russell, Perez, then Tsunoda, Albon, Sargent, Joe, Hulkenberg, Bottas the top 15, Stroll, Magnussen and Lawson the 18th and last of the drivers still in this race. Carlos Sainz didn't start this race in the Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton coming together with his teammate Russell into turn 1 on lap 1 and is out of this race. Speak of his teammate Russell, sweeps round the outside of Gasly into turn 1. 7th spot sealed for the British racer. Gasly down to 8.
Committed more aggressively that time, George Russell. Gasly gave him more space as a result, and George Russell makes his way through. One more Alpine before he needs to make his way through to the rear of Charles Leclerc. He's trying to make amends, isn't he, George Russell? Driving with real fight here.
And we're only on lap 23 of 57. After all that, what a frenetic start. Opening 23 laps for this Qatar Grand Prix, where we could be expecting anywhere between 3 and Christian Horner, Red Bull team principal, saying, well, we might end up doing 6 or 7 laps, pit stops, I should say. So this is really going to be a unique circumstantial race. Oscar Piastri's next pit stop can come no later than lap number 25. We are on lap number 23.
It is remarkable helpful how we can predict them in. We need a sort of an eye calendar, don't we? We can put them all in as to when they're going to stop, when we expect to see them. It kind of brings me back to the fueling days when you knew how much fuel they had to get them through to the next stop, so you knew about when they would stop. In any case, you do wonder if teams also are predicting, are trying to plan in their rivals' next stop and then potentially plan an undercut. It does seem relatively easy, though, to get those moves done on track with the power of that front straight DRS zone. So relatively fluid action.
It certainly is. Well, we are approaching half race distance. We'll get there at about lap 29 as Perez steals the fastest lap. And we should remind you as well, if you're joining us late, this is the Qatar Grand Prix, where tyres have been the talk of the town. And coming into the Grand Prix, due to some tyre safety issues that were noted after Friday from the tyre supplier Pirelli, the FIA has imposed a maximum tyre life of 18 laps across the compounds, and that includes tyres already used across the weekend. So that means really it makes this a minimum 3-stop race. So if we do sound like we're tyre watching, that is the reason why.
It's been a huge talking point throughout the weekend. The compression, the crushing basically of the pure structure of the tyre has forced this change. There have been changes to the circuit here throughout free practice to try and accommodate it. They simply were not enough to satisfy the tyre manufacturer that the race would be safe. And there it is, the first black and white flag for track limits, and it is for Sergio Perez, sitting in 9th position. So as expected, that is going to play a role here around half distance.
Perez started from the pit lane up into 9th. He started on the hard compound tyre, now on that medium. So he's made some good progress up into 9th in a car that should easily cut through the field. But I think the bulk of the overtakes are being done on that main straight with DRS, but also, well, mainly by George Russell going into that left-hander at turn 6. And here is an example. Down the main straight is Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo, hunting down Logan Sargent in the Williams into turn 1. The rear wing flap is the drag reduction system when it opens in the allocated area, which is only down this main straight and can only open when you are within a second of the car in front. Can you get a couple of extra kilometres an hour boost compared to that in front of you? Zhou was actually worried about DRS trains developing throughout this race. Not such the case for the time being, where we are on lap 25, but Zhou not able to get past Sargent on that occasion. Sargent still on 11th. Zhou on the harder compounded tyre down in 12th.
They are
Chinese racer.
They're relatively new, though, those hard compound tyres for Zhou.
Compared to Sargent,
only 5 laps old, so he is in a better position in terms of the tyre mileage. Back at the front of the field, Lando Norris is homing in like a papaya pigeon on the back of Fernando Alonso. Yeah, no, thank you. We've got enough stops to cover on the rear of Fernando Alonso's car, and looks to be in a strong position as his teammate pits.
Piastri pits down in the pits. It's Rosanna Tennant.
Yeah, and it was a very nice stop for Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. The mechanics doing a good job. That was a 2.1 stop time. And Charles Leclerc and Esteban Ocon also in. The Ferrari mechanics getting the job done for Charles with a 2.3 stoppage time. And quickly we focus on the Alpine team. And Esteban Ocon is back out. A little slower, 3 seconds stationary for Esteban Ocon. But all three cars back out onto the faster black stuff.
So Piastri, Leclerc, Ocon all coming into the pits. Zhou Guanyu sweeps round the outside of the Alfa Romeo in turn one, round the outside of Logan Sargent in the Williams. That move's been coming for a while. Ninth goes to Zhou, 10th goes to Sargent, and feeding out from his pit stop Leclerc in the Ferrari behind Stroll down in 14.
Yeah, the seat is burning, man. Anything we can do at the pit stop? Throw me water or something.
Understood, Fernando. We'll have a think if we can do anything. It's going to be difficult.
So that's Fernando Alonso, who's currently in second place in this race for Aston Martin, complaining about a burning seat. What could that be, Alex?
So often it's electronics, control electronics, which sit around the driver's seat in the car, and they just get hot with the amount of deployment of energy. This is a very high deployment circuit, very low regen circuit, but it can be any of those electrical boxes that sit around the driver's position, gaining in resistance. Fernando Alonso does pit. Now let's have a look if they are able to find him anything. I immediately cannot think of anything unless they're just going to chuck ice in there. Whether they have anything like that in the pit lane. He rolls into his box.
Rosanna, have you got a bottle of water down there?
Do you know what? I feel for Fernando Alonso. I feel like I'd like someone to throw water over me. He's back out, an incredibly quick stop. I couldn't see any water, ice or dry ice or otherwise being put into the cockpit, but I am starting to wonder whether we're going to see some reliability issues towards the end of this race. It is still unbelievably hot here in Qatar. Don't forget, this is a night race. It's just after 9:15 local time, and yet the temperature is still up in the mid-30s. It's unbelievably spicy down here. Please, could you throw me some water?
If they banned Fernando Alonso, it was only for 2.3 seconds, so I'm not sure it would have helped that much. We do have a penalty, the first of the race. Sergio Perez then has turned a black and white flag into a 5-second penalty for track limits, and I believe the first potentially of many to do so.
Right, so we've got to keep a track of tyres and track limits penalties then. This really is an enthralling Qatar Grand Prix, and there's going to be one for the brain to get your head around. But Perez then, who is currently in 4th position in this race, having started from the pit lane after a power unit change, pretty much a whole chassis change really, but he got the pit lane start for power unit changes, is already up into 4th, but with a 5-second time penalty. We are under the lights here in Qatar. It is dusty, it is sandy offline still. We've had no support racing action all weekend long, and it's lap 28 of 57. Pit stops happening. Second place man Norris comes in for another pit stop. He peels into his pit box outside McLaren, and they fit some medium tyres on to the British racer, who now feeds back into the fast lane and will feed out behind his teammate Piastri, who sprints down turn 1, looking at the back of Albon's Williams as they battle for 4th on the road. Norris will peel out just behind Zhou Guanyu in 7th spot. So the Chinese racer goes through into 6th, Norris down into 7th. Verstappen leads Russell by 23.5 seconds.
I have a lovely tyre graphic in the com box here, and I can tell you that it has crashed so much. So many have the pit stops been. Oscar Piastri looking to the inside of Alex Albon. They go side by side through the exit of turn 6. Wow, look at that. Piastri around the outside of turn 7 and turn 8, but does not find the grip as he arcs the steering wheel in of his McLaren, and the Williams, the Gulf liveried Williams of Alex Albon, charges ahead at the apex.
Albon putting that car in all the right places despite Piastri trying his utmost to get through. Albon 4th, Piastri 5th, Zhou, Norris, Alonso, who is having problems with his seat burning up. Bottas is 9th, Stroll rounds out the top 10, then it's Leclerc, Ocon, Gasly, Magnussen, Tsunoda, the top 15, Lawson, Hulkenberg and Sargent, the 18 runners left in this race. Hamilton and Sainz are out. Sainz didn't start this race. Hamilton coming together with his teammate in turn 1 with Russell. Lap 29, halfway through this Qatar Grand Prix. Verstappen leads, but there was drama in lap 1, turn 1. The two Mercedes coming together, and Hamilton spearing out of this race. He is out of this one. His teammate Russell carrying on in a race that is being deemed by tyre strategy. But halfway through, Verstappen leads Russell and Perez. Okay, so Piastri is 4th and Albon rounds out the top 5 still. Right, okay, so we've had a couple of pit stops in the last few moments. We're now over half race distance. Here's Russell.
So, George, we're currently looking at possible P4 here. Keep on top of those track limits.
Continuous messages for multiple drivers for track limits throughout the Grand Prix so far. Only Perez then getting as far as a penalty though, but quite clearly all the teams' messaging systems lighting up. George Russell looking at a possible P4. I think he needs to be worried mainly about the two McLarens, which still have lightning pace on almost all the tyres they throw at them through the mid-stage of this Grand Prix.
Has anything surprised you? We were a bit unaware of what exactly this race is going to bring at us, but has anything surprised you massively in these first 30 laps?
I'm surprised by how short the teams are pitting with regards to giving themselves a lot to do through to the end of the race. I really expected to see them extending every single set of tyres as far as they could get it, but it certainly feels that the teams are pouncing on opportunities potentially to undercut each other, or using tyres that already have mileage on them, of course, early on in the race, as we see Norris make a move round the outside of Joe Gragny. Relatively easy pass on the Alfa Romeo, promotes his Papaya McLaren back up into 6th position.
Yeah, Joe and his Alfa Romeo teammate going long as they can, as long as they are allowed to by the FIA. Up into 7th is Joe, having started from 19th and last on the grid. So having a good race of it for the time being, but we still got several laps left to play out for this one. The 17th race of the Formula 1 season in 2023. It's lap 30. Max Verstappen comes across the beam to start lap 31, and his next pit stop can be no later than lap 34. He's currently out there on a set of medium tyres, so he will have to come in by lap 34, and this is the sound of the Dutchman, who could probably take it rather easy out there with 22.5 seconds in hand.
Okay, but let's have a managed increase in pace at this point.
What's that?
If you pick up the pace a little bit from here, but it has to be sustainable.
You've got to love Formula 1 language, haven't you? He could have said go slightly faster, but where's the fun in that? For Max Verstappen. Interestingly, Sergio Perez, 30 seconds off the leader, is more or less on sequence now with Max Verstappen. 12 laps on his set of medium tyres, 13 laps on Max Verstappen's set. So he's done a good job to come up through the field as Charles Leclerc makes a move around the outside of Lance Stroll, the textbook one, all the way around the outside of turn 1. But Stroll has kept his Aston Martin in it to no avail, though. Leclerc squeezes him and runs him out of road.
Yeah, battle for 10th there. Leclerc gets it. Stroll down to 11th. But Stroll able to have a bit of a racier race. He's had a real struggle this weekend so far, so much so he even had a bit of a fracas with his with some team personnel after a poor qualifying on Friday, which was not really on and quite widely dismissed as poor behaviour by the entire paddock. So Lance Stroll, though, struggling compared to his teammate Fernando Alonso, just an out-and-out pace. And it's difficult, isn't it, Alex, when you get into a rut like that mentally for Stroll?
He looks to have lost total confidence in the car. He's having a bit of a stronger Grand Prix, and it'll be heartened to see Fernando Alonso only around 6 seconds up the road now, albeit that they're very much off strategy. He's had to let Alonso through, but Alonso boxes for 4-lap-old hard tyres, Stroll on 9-lap-old hard tyres. They're not so far away from each other on the track or on strategy as Sergio Perez pits.
Yeah, they didn't touch Perez's car for 5 seconds to serve that track limits penalty, and that opens up a greater debate, I think, that Alex Albon, who peels into his pit box, started a few rounds ago, where 5-second penalties sometimes don't seem like they're enough, especially when it is for a top team or a top car. They can get rid of it and recover that time so easily compared to those in the midfield or towards the back of the pack. Albon feeds out in between a Haas and an Alpha Tauri. That's Magnussen and Tsunoda. Magnussen 13th. Then comes Albon and Tsunoda in 15th.
Thanks, Albon. making his way in his Williams up to the inside of the AlphaTauri.
That was close though, wasn't it? The AlphaTauri round the right-hander just shut the door and very nearly cut across the Williams, and that could have been a front wing gone for Albon, but he backed off just in time. Tsunoda bullish with his driving for the first 33 laps of this 57-lap race, and that was for 14th only. They're both on the hard compounded tyre. Tsunoda, I think they're about 9 laps old, and then Albon on brand new. Russell into the pits then, he's back out, 2.6 second stop, and he's trundling towards the end, pitted, and he is now, Piastri's through, so Norris is through. Russell will feed out perhaps just behind the first Alfa Romeo of Joe. I think that's going to be 6th spot. He feeds out in for Russell, and he's switched onto the hard tyres. And speak of the other Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas gets done by Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, who sweeps round the outside of turn 1. That becomes the inside of turn 2, but off into the gravel, rejoining though onto the tarmac. It's Fernando Alonso who's out and off. He's rejoined, doesn't look like there's any damage, but his tyres are absolutely covered in sand, dust and gravel. Alonso rejoining in 7th, but he's got a fast charging Bottas right behind him.
Looks to be the early stage of the lap for Fernando Alonso, so I'll be interested to see what has gone on with that Aston Martin. Not obviously contact or other damaged cars out there. Max Verstappen being told to box, having reached 15 laps on this set of tyres, but that is a big moment for Fernando Alonso, who's lost out then who's lost a lot of ground in real terms to both McLarens and taken himself potentially out of the podium battle. And it's just down. It's a big moment of oversteer down in turn 3 for Fernando Alonso, who finds himself well wide, and he was very lucky to escape the gravel there with a deep gravel on the outside of turn 3, covering the floor of that Aston Martin. He then rejoins right in front of the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc and takes the line. Charles Leclerc needing to take evasive action to the left of circuit.
That has surely got to be a penalty. The reason there was so much dust and dirt being kicked up by Alonso was that he found the support road, the runoff area after the gravel. He clattered through it, managed to get some traction back onto some tarmac, fed in right on the racing line, but Leclerc coming with a lot more speed, and Bottas too. I think the stewards will have to have a look at that, and they are indeed. It's been noted, rejoining unsafely.
The dirt down at turn 2 and 3 is still settling some 30-40 seconds later from where Fernando Alonso went off a few moments ago. We're rejoining Alex Albon, trying to make his way past Yuki Tsunoda on what has been a very up and day down for the Williams. They've led their first lap since 2015 down at Williams when Max Verstappen pitted earlier on in the Grand Prix. Alex Albon now finds himself battling over 14th place with a very elbows out Japanese driver.
Yeah, Tsunoda still winning that one out for the time being. Verstappen pits from the lead and is already towards the end of the pit lane and feeding back out in the run to turn 1. Verstappen maintains the lead, such is his advantage, and he is now on a set of hard compound tyres. He leads Piastri, Norris, Joe, Russell the top 5, Leclerc, Alonso, Bottas, Stroll, Ocon the top 10, Gasly, Perez, Magnussen, Tsunoda, Albon the top 15. Those two, as we say, in an absolute fight for 14th. Lawson is 16th, then comes Hulkenberg and Sargent. This is the sound of George Russell into the braking zone of turn 1 with DRS aided, makes easy pickings of Zhou Guanyu's 4th spot, and Russell gets the Chinese racer who goes down to 5th.
That is the 4th place that Mercedes were talking about, and those are the expected contenders.
Well, I'm not feeling well at all.
Logan, you fought a brave day, but let's bring it in and call it a day. Let's look after you.
James, I promise you I can do this.
All right, I'll leave it to you, buddy.
You have my word.
Go for it.
Wow, that is some emotional team radio from Logan Sargent. He said he was feeling unwell, and then that rather soft voice, reassuring voice at the end was James Vowles, the team principal, who has, in the build-up to this weekend, Williams putting out a public video showing their support for Logan Sargent, the American in his rookie year, who is under pressure and has not met the standards required of him they're giving in to the end of the season, but when you look at what Albon is achieving in one car, Sargent, who crashed in Japan in qualifying, span out in Qatar in the sprint race, and now clearly not feeling unwell, he's plumb last in 18th, Alex.
Brave stuff from Sargent, who clearly wants to show the team he's going to brave it out, but I have to agree with James Vowles on this one. At this stage, he's not going to score points in this Grand Prix. It's not going to be the one. I do believe he'd be better off actually looking after himself, but only the driver knows in that situation. I've been there. Driving a race car when you're not feeling good is a very, very horrible experience indeed.
Yeah, well, he is just within DRS range of Hulkenberg down in 17th, but let's fast forward back up through the field, and there is a fantastic battle going on between the Alpine of Esteban Ocon and the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll. Ocon getting through on Stroll for 8th position, but they were side by side through turns 1, 2 and 3.
Yeah, really were. Lance Stroll showing Esteban Ocon the outside of turn 1, and he returned the favour through the middle of turn 2. And Stroll coming off slightly worse in the end, shoveled out all over the curb, and will now be receiving the attentions of Pierre Gasly in the 10 Alpine on a hard compound set of tyres, who is now absolutely on the gearbox of the second Aston Martin.
Yeah, Joe Pitts, that allows Leclerc to get through and have some clean air. 5 seconds the gap between himself and Russell for 4th. Then comes Alonso in 6th, Bottas, and this is Ocon in 8th. Then comes Stroll. Then this is the sound of Ocon's teammate, Pierre Gasly. 2 Alpines in the top 10 at the moment, who brought upgrades this weekend. Feeling a little bit faster, are they, the French squad, as Gasly up through the gears, 6th gear, then just into 7th before he gets down to 5th, into the right-hander, chasing Stroll round the final corner. He'll get DRS. He's just within a second, half a second he is in behind of Lance Stroll down the main straight, while his teammate in front looks at the Alfa Romeo of Bottas for 7th. Can Gasly find a way through? No, he can't. It's all even out there. Bottas 7th, Ocon 8th, Stroll 9th, Gasly 10th.
Tremendous pace at this stage, considering they're a midfield team for Alpine. They're sticking with the Ferraris and the Aston Martins of this world and making their way through the midfield, apart from Lance Stroll, who is a little way off the pace of Fernando Alonso, some 9/10 last time around, which is why he's receiving the attentions of the 2 Alpines. But it is Esteban Ocon who's zoomed as well up to the gearbox of Valtteri Bottas, who is his next target. So could it be another double points race for Alpine, just like they had in Suzuka? They're very much on sequence for that potentially at the moment.
Yeah, and in the constructors though, they're a little bit in no man's land really. Down in 6th, 88 adrift of McLaren, and 61 in front of Williams. So they are a little bit detached from the front runners, but they aren't grouped in with those behind them. But the 2 Alpines then up into 8th and 9th. Ocon ahead of Gasly. Stroll rounding out the top 10, and this is the sound of Stroll and how he was defending. Actually went a little bit deep into the left-hander.
Lost out significantly, a further second over his pace deficit as a result of losing out on that move. I want to throw you back towards the front of the field, where both McLarens are actually pegging Max Verstappen at the front. 26 dead last time around for Max Verstappen. Okay, a couple of tenths up the road from Lando Norris, 3 tenths up the road for Oscar Piastri, but it's on and off with the McLarens on a much later medium compound tyre than Verstappen is his 3-lap-old hard. So they're staying with him, but it is a 6/10 gap back to Piastri and a 10-second gap back to Norris. They're going to have to find something for Verstappen, and I don't think it's there.
Yeah, but everyone said, a lot of the drivers who were in front of the McLarens on the grid, and let's remember in qualifying, the McLarens, both of them had their best lap times deleted for exceeding track limits. So they were fast in qualifying, and everyone was worried that they were going to cut through the field, and right now they have done. They're both out there on a medium compound tyre. Piastri in second, I think about 12 laps on that medium tyre. Norris on 10-lap-old medium tyres. Russell closing in behind. He has the fastest lap in 4th and recovering after that turn 1, lap 1 incident with his teammate Lewis Hamilton. That put Hamilton out of the race. There'll be a big debrief, I'm sure, in the Mercedes garages after this race. But let's head down on lap 39 of 57. Rosanna Tennant in the pits.
Yeah, just listening into the Red Bull radio of Max Verstappen talking to his race engineer Gianpiero Lambiesi. We've seen Max in the pit lane twice. Before the race, he alluded to having to do 4 stops during the Grand Prix. But what his engineer is saying at the moment is it's probably going to be an 11 lap stint and then a 12 lap stint if they split it roughly equally. So expect to see Max Verstappen in again, but perhaps only once, not twice.
So, and also not the 6 that Christian Horner was alluding to before
I can't
the start
count that
of this
high,
race.
Harry.
Hang on, we've got a move going on track. Zhou Guanyu, DRS getting the better of Yuki Tsunoda. Managed to use the DRS and the toe to slide right underneath the rear wing of the AlphaTauri in front. The AlphaTauri moved to the inside line to defend, and that allowed Zhou to go around the outside into turn 1 and through on the Japanese racer, who's been getting his elbows out all day long, but finally has succumbed to Zhou Guanyu. Zhou up in 14th, Tsunoda in 15th. Here's Perez.
It's another 5-second penalty for track limits. Just hurting our race.
It really is.
Hugh Bird on the radio there to Sergio Perez. Another 5 seconds for track limits.
Yeah, you've got to keep it within the white lines, especially as he's the only driver who's been pinged so far. Though it looks to be the exit of turn 15, or at least that's what we have seen of Perez when he's been off the road. So that's 10 seconds down on where he potentially could have finished, and realistically the end of potential points for Perez as he sits in 11th place at the moment. For Max Verstappen, it looked for all the world like he might have to use the soft at one point. Of course, forgetting that he only did one flying lap in both stages, the first 2 stages of sprint qualifying, and so they're extremely low mileage medium tyres that he carried through, which has given him the advantage at the front.
More pit stops. Bottas, Stroll, Magnussen all peel into the pit lane. Rosanna's down there once again.
Certainly am, and Bottas is out on a 3.1 stoppage time. Stroll 3.7 for the Aston Martin mechanics, and Kevin Magnussen in the pits, also being joined by Liam Lawson as well. A little bit slower for Kevin Magnussen there. Stoppage time of 4.6 seconds, not great for them, and the Haas team need to stay where they are because they've got Nico Hülkenberg coming in as well on a double stack. Let's see how they go on this. Maybe they're trying to take it slow and steady to get the 2 of them done. Let's see there, 3.1 for Nico Hülkenberg, and it was a 2.6 stop for Liam Lawson in the AlphaTauri, proving a pretty tricky evening for Liam Lawson and his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, who has had his elbows out, but not scrapping for points-paying positions at the moment. And if we're talking about points-paying, actually Lewis Hamilton, who of course is out of the race, will perhaps be breathing a sigh of relief that Perez is getting these time penalties, because of course that battle in the drivers' standings, Lewis Hamilton could still get P2. Let's head to Logan Sargent's radio.
Are you retiring, mate? Are you retiring? It's your call, buddy. You're the one making the call if you want to retire or not, Logan. There's no shame to retire if you're feeling unwell.
Yeah, I need to stop.
Sargent on the radio then, who is currently in 14th, but he's slown right off. He's just let Stroll through, and running off the road now is Sargent, and he will come in to retire, not feeling unwell. The American rookie trying to hold on in a tough rookie season with just 6, including this one, Grand Prix left. He's slowed right down. That's brought the yellow flag out, and he's just letting through a couple of fast cars. The Haas of Magnussen speeds past, but a shame for Sargent. Spun out in the sprint yesterday, retires due to illness today, Rosanna.
Yeah, so difficult to listen to Logan on the radio there. It is unbelievably hot, as I've said countless times over this weekend. Whether it is just the conditions that are making Logan Sargent feel unwell, I'm not sure. I'll have to try and ask the team and get the latest on that. But if you're not feeling well in this heat, you need to get out of a Formula 1 car. I don't think it's safe for himself or all the other drivers out on track as well to have someone who's not feeling their best in a car travelling at a couple of 100 miles an hour.
It gets to the point where you're just plain inaccurate in the car, and that's the moment when you've got to stop, because as you correctly say, Rosanna, it's not only you out there, and if you have a big moment and collide with somebody, then it's not smart stuff. Logan Sargent making the correct decision there for me, and this is not the ambient or the circuit to be struggling at.
It's fine. It's fine. It's okay. It's okay.
You have to feel for Sargent. He's wheeled in to his garage and he's trying to take out the water piece that's attached to his helmet. His visor is up, his eyes are closed with frustration. You can see the beads of sweat dripping down his brow, and that will be another retirement for Logan Sargent. That leaves 17 runners still in this race on lap 42 of 57 here for the Qatar Grand Prix. Max Verstappen leads, Piastri, Norris, Russell, Leclerc the top 5, Alonso, Ocon, Gasly, Perez, Albon the top 10, Joe, Bottas, Stroll, Magnussen, Tsunoda the top 15, Lawson and Hulkenberg now the 17th and last of the drivers remaining in this race. Sargent out, Hamilton out after that turn 1, lap 1 crash with his teammate, and Sainz, who unfortunately could not start this race due to a fuel leak within his Ferrari. The battles are still playing out though. We're expecting some more pit stops still to play after the FIA at the start of today, due to tyre safety issues, imposing a maximum tyre life of 18 laps across the compounds, and that includes tyres already used across the weekend. So that already set everyone on the back foot, and Piastri and Norris are due a pit stop very, very soon.
I'm just trying to work out at the rear of the field if there was anyone who used that early safety car to effect to get them in a position where they don't have to stop again, but I can't see anybody. Just, it must be said, Stroll, Magnussen, Tsunoda, Lawson and Hulkenberg were right on the bubble, but I don't see drivers who are going to now make it, even with this tyre allocation, potentially to the end.
I'm wondering if Joe has done quite well, because he started down in 19th. He's up in 11th. He's in front of his teammate on the hard compound.
He's six laps into this hard stint, so he will definitely have to stop again.
Okay, so either way, Joe though improving from last place at the moment, but still not quite solved yet. Lap 43 of 57. Leclerc's been told to come into the pits, the sole Ferrari in this race. So have Piastri and Norris. They are due pit stops. Another 5-second time penalty. It's coming not to Sergio Perez this time, but it's coming to Lance Stroll for track limits violations. And now Pierre Gasly is also under investigation for track limits. So by the time it gets to that point, you can expect a penalty. Piastri's into the pits.
In comes Oscar Piastri. I'm calling him the first driver to pit for the final time in this Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri will make his way back out onto the circuit. It's going to be interesting to see where he rolls out. He should be able to just sneak ahead of the Mercedes of George Russell as another penalty rolls in, this time for Pierre Gasly, and he doesn't, of course. He comes out in front of Fernando Alonso in his Aston Martin, Oscar Piastri.
Leclerc pits, Ocon pits as well behind him. I think it was just caught the end of Leclerc's stop. It was fairly rapid, actually, 2.1 in the end for the Ferrari team as Ocon is released. Perez comes into the pits as well. Where does Leclerc feed out? He'll come just in front of now the sole remaining Williams through into turn 1. Leclerc 7th, Albon in 8th, Joe gets up into 9th, Ocon should come out in 10th, and Perez will feed out just behind him as well. And it was a very slow stop to Perez, but was that because of a 5-second time penalty?
Yeah,
that was why it was slow for him. So actually he'll feed out. I think he's just come out in front of Kevin Magnussen, so he's in 13th is Sergio Perez after that. He's giving himself more work than he needs.
We are seeing as well, we are seeing a general slowing of the pit stops here, and I do wonder if it's pure fatigue for the teams who've done stop after stop after stop in these temperatures. McLaren were absolutely lightning early on in this Grand Prix. Let's see how this one goes for Lando Norris, a very important one for him in his battle with his teammate Oscar Piastri. All seemed to go well actually down in the McLaren pit stop. 2.1 seconds for Norris, and there then the other McLaren is screaming down that front straight. Will Lando Norris be able to get out in front of his Australian teammate? It's going to be very close indeed, but Piastri sweeps down into turn 1 and retains the podium position.
But game on between the two McLarens then. Piastri 3rd, Norris in 4th, and on hard compound tyres that are of equally level used. So let's see how that one pays out in the remaining laps of this race. 45 Gone 57 out of the 57 that we started with. Russell has been boosted up into second after these pit stops, but Piastri and Norris came awfully close together. I think it was Monza this year, wasn't it? They were fighting on track. Team boss Andrea Stella wasn't happy with that one bit. 2.4 seconds the gap between them at the moment. Let's see how that one plays out over the course.
Yeah, I asked Andrea Stella about when they got close in Monza. He said they didn't get close. They touched in Monza earlier on this year, and they've been told in no uncertain terms that they will not be touching again. Logan Sargent getting out of the Williams, and poor lad's not feeling well at all, is he? No. I do hope they will have someone directly to, and they will have somebody to attend to Logan Sargent down at Williams and help him out, because he's not feeling good.
Yeah, he's got out of his cockpit though. Rosanna's outside.
Yeah, but very slowly, having to be helped by the mechanics to get out of the car and into the garage. And I've spoken to the team, and they say it is something that's just come on this evening. It's not something that Logan Sargent's been suffering with all weekend. So I fear it may be something to do with dehydration, perhaps. So difficult to stay hydrated in these desert conditions. And I speak from experience.
Someone get Rosanna a bottle of water. Quick. Lap 46 of 57. Verstappen leads Russell, Piastri, Norris, Leclerc, the top 5. Joe, Alonso, Ocon, Bottas and Stroll, the top 10. They are your current point scorers. Piastri has the fastest lap to boot as well, and Piastri and Norris, the two McLaren teammates, starting to get a little bit of a race on there. 2.3 seconds the gap between the two teammates, as Pierre Gasly is stung with another 5-second time penalty for track limits.
Another penalty for Pierre Gasly, and that'll really sting, because he's sitting behind Lance Stroll, who has a penalty of his own just on the edge of the points. So an option potentially gone then for Pierre Gasly. But we know Rosanna's a hardy soul. All she do with that bottle of water is pour it over Fernando Alonso's cockpit to help him out. Listening on board with Lando Norris.
Position, bring it home. Why do you want to do that? We have a big gap. Clearly a little quicker.
And that's Lando Norris negotiating with the team, and he's got a point. 20 seconds, nearly 21 seconds is the gap he has to Charles Leclerc behind him, and Norris wants to fight here. I think he was gutted that Piastri took the win in the sprint, not gutted because his teammate got the spoils, but because he didn't get the spoils. So let's see if they do pin that one. No racing between the two McLarens, or if Norris decides actually I think we can get a bit of a race on here. Gasly comes into the pits, no one touches the car for 5 seconds, and then it's a quick change before he is released back out into the fast lane.
He have a further 5-second penalty, as will the Williams of Alexander Albon, who picks up a 5-second penalty of his own. Interesting times at McLaren. They're in this battle in the Constructors' Championship with Aston Martin. It'll be a huge day for them.
Lando, we see that, we know that, it doesn't matter. We're worried a little bit about Russell, gap 13.4 ahead. We think he might put a soft on towards the end of the race and be quick.
Exactly, you're worried, so...
So they're worried, that's the excuse at least McLaren are coming up with. They're worried that Russell might well come into the pit, stick on the soft compound tyre right at the end, the fastest rubber available to the drivers, and get his skates on essentially, and try and trouble Piastri and Norris for a position on the podium.
So there are 11-second interval is Piastri to George Russell. So that a pit stop would put him 16 seconds, around 15-16 seconds behind the pair of them, and then but the thing is that soft compound tyre would only be quick for 4 or 5 laps or so. It's interesting discussion down at McLaren, and Russell and Piastri so used to being the younger, and Norris so used to being the dominant force down there.
Well, we continue racing under the lights here at the Losail International Circuit across 5 Sports Extra, BBC Sounds, and wherever you may be listening to us. Lap 49 of 57. Verstappen leads by over 25 seconds to Russell. Yeah, it's lap 49 of 57 under the lights here at the Losail International Circuit. The three-time champion now, Verstappen, leads by over 25 seconds. The big incident was turn 1, lap 1. The two Mercedes cars coming together. Hamilton out of this race. Verstappen leads Russell and Piastri for the time being. Okay, back to the track action, and it's straight back to another penalty. That goes to Alex Albon this time. He picks it up for a 5 seconds for track limits. They were doing so well apart from Perez in the first.
Well, you've got to remember they get the first 3 for free.
Well, that is true, yeah. But so they're just coming thick and fast now, aren't they?
So you get to this point, and they've had all their free passes, and now they're starting to pick up the penalties. I knew that Sergio Perez would not be the first, and I'm sure Albon will not be the last, even with 7 laps still to run. Every single corner around the Losail International Circuit is an option to be in track limits or outside of them, and so those penalties coming in thick and fast. George Russell will have to stop here. He's done 16 laps on that set of medium tyres, 18 laps on that set of hard tyres, I should say. 18 laps only allowed per tyre set. So the question is, what tyre will he then put on? He's got 2 laps left. The soft would be the intelligent solution, with only 5 laps of the Grand Prix remaining.
Yeah, we really are into the closing stages around this 5.4 kilometre, 3.3 mile track, 16 turns, 6 to the left and 10 to the right. And the sound is Russell in the Mercedes down the main straight. He's
lost the visor. He's lost the
little bit of plastic. Is it the little bit of plastic that sits right on the edge of the cockpit above the steering wheel? It looked like at one point he was just resting his hands on the steering wheel, but then he's starting to fiddle around.
And I do wonder if that's why he's opening the visor. We've seen him opening the visor again and again and again in the pit lane for George Russell. I do wonder if he's wiping his eyes, because that can be incredibly pressurizing. There's normally a little sort of plastic alpine range that sits in front of George Russell and Lewis Hamilton's cockpit, and it looks to have flown off the Mercedes. George putting his arms and hands out of the front of the cockpit almost to defend his head against the wind. You get so much buffeting, which is the helmet lifting off your head as the driver, if you don't have that element on the car.
Well, that's what the trained eyes of Alex Brundle saw. The untrained eyes of me just saw him resting his hands there above the steering wheel down the main straight. But clearly more at play there for Russell, who has been in recovery mode for this Grand Prix since turn 1 of lap 1 after a clash with his teammate. That sent his teammate spearing off into the gravel, and Hamilton out of this race. Russell managing to stay within the race, and on lap 51, at the end of lap 51, he comes into the pits, and I believe this will be his final pit stop.
Visor on the helmet up again. We should clarify, that is not the piece that's been lost. The piece that's been lost is on the car, and look at his eyes then in his helmet. It doesn't look to be too bloodshot, although he's had wind blowing in his eyes, but he's opening the helmet visor every time he comes in the pit lane, and he's done so again for this final stop.
But what is that bit of plastic on the above the steering wheel doing then? It's protecting the wind.
It's to protect the driver's helmet from the airflow.
Does the visor not do that?
It does do, but the lifting of the helmet can be very aggressive if the airflow is not correctly treated around the driver's cockpit. I do wish Lewis Hamilton's car was still in the race so I could compare them for you, but unfortunately he was out on lap 1.
We'll leave that for the Checkered Flag podcast. All the reaction to this Qatar Grand Prix coming up on that. So do have a look out for the Checkered Flag podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Lap 51, or at the end of it, lap 52 now, and Verstappen comes into the pits, and it's quick work from the Red Bull mechanics. Actually a little bit slow on the front left. They do manage to get it on in time, and in the blink of an eye, or a blink of 4.1 seconds, he is back into the fast lane and trundling down the rest of the pit lane to rejoin this race, and he'll rejoin well and truly in the lead on the medium tyre.
We should clarify, it was the soft, while we were busy talking about George Russell's visor, it was the soft tyre that went on the Mercedes. Max Verstappen will easily make it back out in front of both McLarens, although you can see them in the background or you could see them in the background as Max Verstappen came out of pit road, with a big moment for Lando Norris as he tried to catch Oscar Piastri. Here's the slow stop, and here's why you could see them. The left front of Max Verstappen's tyre set was very slow on.
A rare slow stop from Max Verstappen, who does feed out though in the lead on the medium set of tyres. Russell then doing what McLaren feared he would do. Russell's gone onto the soft compounded tyres for a short stint towards the end of this race to try and catch the McLarens, Piastri and Norris on hard tyres. And we've just had a little look, Alex, at Lando Norris having a play with his visor, much like Russell.
I think they're just trying to cool down and get some airflow through to the front of their helmet. So it could just be a cooling attempt there from George Russell.
Well, somebody who can tell us is Rosanna Tennant.
Yeah, I've just been talking to the Mercedes team, and they say it is just George Russell trying to get air into the cockpit and into his face as we have a bit of action out on track, Harry.
Yeah, Gasly trying to go around the outside of Stroll, but runs wide in doing so, kicks up the dust, the sparks fly from below that blue and pink Alpine. I wonder if he'll be able to hold on to that spot. Stroll having another look down the inside, doesn't get far enough along with 5 laps remaining. Stroll bails out of that one. Gasly skates through that, the battle for 10th, but he did run all 4 wheels off the track in doing so.
Both drivers who've received penalties so far in this Grand Prix for track limits offences, although when you're wheel to wheel you tend to get a free pass. It was Gasly who looked to the outside of the first corner, a very late lunge. Lance Stroll having none of it, runs in wider and wider. Gasly kicks up dirt and dust with the left front tyre and is able though to make the move up the inside of turn 2 and up the inside of Lance Stroll.
Carlos Sainz stuck in the garage, didn't even get to start this race in his Ferrari due to a fuel leak from that scarlet red car, and has to sit and watch from the garage. His teammate Charles Leclerc is in this race. He's in 5th spot, 8 seconds back from Russell, who is now stuck on a pair of a set of soft compound tyres to try and reel in the 2 McLarens, but he's got 19 seconds between himself and Norris to try and close that, and running out of time to do so. Meanwhile, further back in the pack, it's getting a little bit tight in turn 1. Stroll, Gasly, Perez, 3 wide through turn 1. Gasly's been told to give back the position to Stroll, and in attempting to do so, Perez has joined the fun and managed to get through on Gasly as well, and is trying down the inside of Stroll. He gets the switch back side by side with the Canadian, who cuts him off through the right-hander. Stroll holds on to 9th, Perez 10th, Gasly down to 11th.
Gasly, who is now under investigation but will not be after giving the position back, took the position while off the road down at turn 1, asked by the team to give the position back, and Perez pounced on that, making his way through into the top 10.
Perez started from the pit lane after a change of chassis and a power unit full change as well, but Perez lined this one up down the main straight with the aid of DRS, and while Gasly was being told by Alpine quite rightly to give that position back, it was always going to be a losing battle for Gasly while Perez was there.
I don't think Gasly could actually see that Perez was there because he was lined up with the rear of Stroll. Very small mirrors, of course, on these modern Formula 1 cars, and I think he just completely missed the fact that Perez was in close pursuit and then snatched the position. Lance Stroll missed nothing though. Perez looking down the inside, but Stroll arced directly to the apex of turn 4 and cut the nose off Stroll's Red Bull.
Yep, Stroll then in 9th in a points paying position in front of Perez, who rounds out the top 10 at the moment. And just as we're talking about Stroll, ding, 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 5-second time penalty for the Canadian. Guess what? The track limits with 3 laps to go.
Like an England-Germany semi-final, isn't it?
And that will put him out of the points with these 3 laps to go. Such a shame for Stroll, who was having a better time of it, a better Sunday of recent times for the Canadian, who still sits inside the top 10 in the driver's standings, but hasn't scored points in Grand Prix since against Belgium, where he finished 9th, and unlike his teammate who has managed to get on the podium 7 times this year, Lance Stroll has had 0 visits to the podium, and a man under pressure. But of course, when your father owns the team, how far does that pressure really go? Right now though, Stroll in 9th with a 5-second time penalty inbound. Perez behind now by about a second. Verstappen ahead of Piastri and Norris, who are about 1.6 seconds the gap between those two. That fight though cooled off before it even really started. Russell's behind, chasing on a set of softs.
Interestingly, George Russell came out 18 seconds back from those two McLarens and has lost significant ground and continues to lose ground, actually, to the two McLarens on his set of soft tyres. We're expecting him to haul up to the back of McLarens. 24 seconds now, 25 seconds. I do wonder if there's a problem for George Russell.
Just looking on the driver tracker as well, he's not around any lapped traffic either, as Gasly looking round the outside of Sergio Perez, trying the move he did on Stroll just a few laps before, where he went wide coming out of turn 1. This time doesn't do that and holds on and gets the position. Gasly through on Perez then, the Frenchman in 10th, the Mexican down to 11th and outside of the points.
Lovely stuff from Gasly, and it will be potentially another double points finish, just as they did in Suzuka for the pair of Alpines. 2 Aston Martins sitting in the points at the moment as well, which would be fantastic for them, and a good recovery given how many points McLaren stand to score. Are we going to see anything from George Russell? No, we're just going to see this move again from Pierre Gasly, who jumped to the inside, then the outside of Sergio Perez, and made the move much in the same way as he made it on Lance Stroll, and was actually all the way off the road there on the exit of turn 1, and I wonder whether he'll be asked to give that position back in a similar way.
Someone to watch out for, probably Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo. You're right, he had to come in for a pit stop, but he, like George Russell, is stuck on the softs and is only a second back from Perez. Then comes Gasly
Russell's
quite quickly.
Another 2 seconds to the McLarens.
He's on his own though, but Leclerc is catching him. 4.2 seconds Leclerc is behind now Russell, who's 27 seconds back from Norris. That's the sound you're hearing, the McLaren going through the turns 12, 13 and 14. The triple right-hander chasing his teammate just a second between those two, but they have been told they are not fighting as we start the final lap 57 of 57 here in Qatar, with Verstappen once again having a fabulous faultless race.
They've been told they're not fighting. I didn't hear them agree, did you? Lando Norris not quite able to get close enough, and is just about to dip within a second of his teammate Oscar Piastri. 9/10 of a second between Norris and Piastri. The problem that Norris has got is he's going to run out of laps here. He's only going to get one more run across the line. If this one was just a few laps longer, we could easily have seen those two chargers side by side, but as it is, lap 57 of 57, I suspect we'll see them finish line astern.
Zhou Guanyu is hounding Sergio Perez, but it won't be for a point. It will only be for 11th spot for the Chinese racer. The points look out of reach for the Alfa Romeo driver, but they do have one Alfa car in the top 8, courtesy of Valtteri Bottas, in a race that had a rather unique spin on it as well, with tyre mandated life use, but they managed to make use of it and get to the end of 57 laps, and having clinched the title in yesterday's sprint race, Max Verstappen, once again imperious, rounds the final corner for the final time in Qatar, and the number 1 car, the 3-time world champion, gets his 49th career win. He crosses the line in first and takes the fastest lap. The two McLarens chasing each other to the line just behind. Piastri gets second, follows up his sprint race win from yesterday with a P2 appearance, and Norris will round out the podium in third as celebrations erupt down the pit lane and in the garages. Russell will come home in fourth, Leclerc in the top 5 in what was a rather unique race, I think, Alex, of watching the tyres, counting them go by, and some good overtaking battles as well.
Well, Verstappen wins on his 24th different circuit in Formula 1, but it was a very different contest, wasn't it?
Well done, Max. So that was a fit, very champion. Well done, really quality drive, well managed. Well done, Max. That is, as GP says, that was a proper quality drive. So we just wanted to cover off all eventualities at the end there. So great drive.
Yeah, good win. Yeah, it was a bit close to comfort, I think, that last stint, but pace was okay. Another win. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, you got the 3. Pole fastest lap on the win. Well done.
Well, he certainly got the job done and did everything he needed to do. Got it done pretty early as well, didn't he? That first stint on the first set of medium tyres put the gap into the rest of the field. But what a fabulous day again for McLaren, who are looking solidly best of the rest.
A career best result in a Grand Prix for Oscar Piastri. Of course, he got the P1 in the sprint, but in the full Grand Prix, gets second. And that young Australian rookie who made the jump from being a reserve driver at Alpine last year, rather controversially signing with McLaren, but that move looking to be wise beyond his years and managed and overseen by Mark Webber, a multiple Grand Prix winner, and certainly somebody rather influential to have in your back pocket as Norris makes it 2 McLarens in the top 3. A double podium for the Woking-based squad. But do you feel Norris will again be a little bit disappointed with that?
They've got their hands full with these two. Piastri and Norris, a brilliant weekend for Oscar Piastri, but you saw how disconsolate Lando Norris was with letting his younger teammate take that first victory for the season. And they are going to be pushing each other. You heard the radio communications where Norris is just gently trying to convince the team, are they going to become more and more and more forceful as these final 6 races, as these final races of the year wear on?
Well, the cheers are up from the grandstands, and Max Verstappen, as the music blasts, peels up into the raised plinth for the P1 position in Parc Fermé, as the television displays behind him showcase his winning methods. He gets out of the cockpit, raises both hands in the air and runs over to his team and goes straight to his mechanics for a hug, pats on the helmets, and another sublime drive from Max Verstappen, who now leads the championship by over 200 points. That's the largest winning margin ever, over 155 points by Vettel back in 2013. So just showcasing once again the power that Max Verstappen and the grip he has over Formula One in 2023. A celebration as well, and a congratulatory pat on the back by the president of the FIA, Mohammed Ben Sulayem. Piastri and Norris in there as well, getting out of their cars. A fist bump between the teammates as they get weighed and have a chat. So all smiles outside of the cockpit.
Definitely so, and they're very much on message as well when you listen into them, when you talk to them in the pen, when you interview them, these two, about what needs to be said about their engagement with the team and their engagement with each other. But it's a hard battle on track. That was an entertaining Grand Prix, I really think, in my opinion, and thank goodness it was, with all of the difficulties throughout the weekend in terms of tyres, safety and delivery of that event.
Things have just wrapped up here in Qatar. The 17th Grand Prix of the season is done and dusted, and the 3-time champion now, Max Verstappen, took the win ahead of the 2 McLarens. Oscar Piastri, the Australian rookie, ahead of the British racer Lando Norris. Lewis Hamilton was taken out in lap 1, turn 1 by his own teammate, but has owned up that was his mistake. He was out of this Grand Prix early doors, but another win for Max Verstappen in Qatar. And they look rather tired though, don't they? Back to looking at the drivers in Parc Fermé, all having a little bit of a chin wag, and they really had to work hard for that one. And with that, actually, P2 and P3 for the McLarens, they're now only 11 points behind Aston Martin in the constructors for fourth.
Well, I mentioned it in the middle of the Grand Prix, and I really think it's a big factor for them, and one of the reasons why the team were on the phone saying, guys, we really do not need to be racing each other hard through the end of this Grand Prix.
Well, we can hear from the top 3, and starting with Lando Norris. David Coulthard's
Lando,
with him.
you've just poured the water over your head. That was a tough race physically, but a great result for the team. Second and third. Put us in the cockpit.
Yeah, just a mega race from start to finish. A good opening lap. I learned from my mistake yesterday of going wide. I told you I'd go tight, and I did, and it worked out. So, yeah, good start, good pace throughout the whole thing. Probably the best pace out there today. So I'm happy. Stressful, hot, sweaty, little bit tired, but yeah, great job for the team. 3 in a row now. So 1.8 pit stop as well by the boys.
Yeah, that was very, very impressive indeed. The physicality of this racetrack, and it was also very busy out there as well with the different pit stops, the limit on the 18 laps. You had to make some passes as well on track to make it stick.
Yeah, I think the 3-stop made it a lot harder. Just physically, you could push a lot more. Even the last stint, you could pretty much push flat out. So, yeah, probably one of the hardest races I've done in a way. But it's a nice challenge, and congrats to Oscar. No mistakes, and of course Max once again.
Well, look, you're standing. Your other buddies on the podium are both sitting down on the job. I think highlighting just how tough this race was.
They need it, I guess. So, yeah.
Okay, Lando, enjoy the third place in what we now know was one of the toughest races out there. And to our sprint race winner yesterday, Oscar, catching your breath. I believe you've been given driver of the day as well, so it's been a really good weekend for you.
I thought you were going to say I got given a 5-second penalty again for track limits. Scared the crap out of me. No, very, very happy, obviously. Turn 1 was nice. That was definitely in the game plan before the race. But yeah, really impressive pace. Definitely the hardest race I've had in my life. So, yeah. I would say that Lando was just standing because it's compulsory, but he's still going. So
he's still standing. Well,
right.
you are a rookie, so just explain to our fans around the world what it feels like. We heard Fernando Alonso, one of the most experienced drivers, talking about the heat in the cockpit, and he was asking, pour water over me at the stop.
Yeah, it was hot. I think also, like Lando said, with the 3 stops, it was basically flat out. So, it was 57 qualifying laps, which I definitely feel like I've done. So, yeah, really a good race. Yeah, happy that all the tyres stayed together. That was good, obviously. But yeah, happy with another trophy too.
Well, that was a great performance, a great weekend for you. Enjoy the podium.
Thank you.
And then for the first time as a 3-time world champion, Max Verstappen, it's been a great weekend for you in Qatar. We didn't see a lot of you this afternoon. You were controlling the race pace. You obviously slowed it down just in the end there. McLaren's were only a few seconds behind you, but a very well executed victory.
Yeah, I think what made the race was my first stint. After that, I could just manage my pace, making sure that the tires were always in a good window. But the McLarens were quick again today. I had to push for it. Yeah, it was definitely a tough race out there.
Well, we just heard from Oscar. He's young in his Grand Prix career. He said it's the toughest race he's ever done. Where does this rank for you?
One of, yeah, top 5 probably.
Okay, well, it's been a very strong weekend for you. This is a great way for you now to be able to properly celebrate your 3rd world title. There's no race tomorrow, so you can go for it.
Yeah, I'm already sweating quite a bit, so I wonder what happened last night. But yeah, we'll enjoy a little bit. But there's still quite a few races out there that we want to win.
We heard from Oscar saying there with 3 mandatory pit stops, it meant it was like qualifying laps. Is this something we should actually be looking at going forward? Was that fun to be in that situation?
I prefer we could just push as long as we can on a tire, not force pit stops. We design cars to be good on tires, so today we couldn't optimize that fully because that's normally our strong point. But we'll see what we can improve in the future.
Okay, Max, enjoy the race victory.
David Coulthard asking the questions there in Parc Fermé to your top 3 at the end of the Qatar Grand Prix. Max Verstappen taking his 14th win of the season, and of course he is now a 3-time world champion. And as I was watching on in Parc Fermé, I could see the Red Bull team, his boss Christian Horner, Adrian Newey, of course the chief designer there, hanging off Max Verstappen's every word. So Max Verstappen taking the checkered flag, and behind him the McLarens headed by Oscar Piastri, our latest winner in Formula 1 as of yesterday. He won the sprint race. He came home ahead of his teammate Lando Norris. Another double podium for McLaren. Wow, have they turned it around in 2023. Huge thank you to Alex Brundle and Harry Benjamin for talking us through the race, and what a weekend it has been here in Qatar. There will be plenty to discuss on our post-race podcast, the Checkered Flag podcast, coming your way later on, so do stick around for that. And also, if you're listening on Sports Etc, do stay tuned, because at 10 to 8 we'll have the Fiji-Portugal match in the Rugby World Cup. But from from all of us here in Qatar, it's a very hot and sweaty goodbye. We'll meet again in a couple of weeks' time for the US Grand Prix. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.